Good evening, everyone. Welcome everyone to the University of South Carolina Joseph F. Rice School of Law. I'd like to thank you all for coming, and we're going to get our program started now. My name is Etienne Toussaint, and I am an associate professor of law here at the University of South Carolina Joseph F. Rice School of Law. It is my distinct honor and immense privilege to welcome you to our law school as we embark upon our second annual celebration of the life and legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr. I would like to first and foremost thank you, our law students, our faculty, our staff, and our community members for your attendance here today. I would also like to recognize and thank our co-sponsor for this event, the University of South Carolina's Center for Civil Rights History and Research, as well as our law school dean, William Hubbard, for his passionate support and commitment to our vision. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. is not a stranger to anyone in this room, and he needs no introduction. As the son of a Southern Baptist minister, a graduate of Morehouse College, and a trained theologian with a doctorate in systematic theology from Boston University, Dr. King's leadership was perhaps inevitable. With rousing sermons and passionate speeches while serving as chief spokesman for nonviolent activism during the Civil Rights Movement, Dr. King would ignite a multiracial coalition of men and women across our country to march for racial justice amidst the unrelenting resistance of Jim Crow segregation and vicious white supremacy. We have seen visions of his bold determination in the face of senseless violence, such as his leadership of marchers across the Edmund Pettus Bridge in Selma, Alabama, on March 9, 1965, only 2 days after police, state troopers, and vigilantes violently attacked civil rights marchers attempting to cross that very same bridge, a tragedy we refer to today as Bloody Sunday. We have heard recordings of his enduring conviction in the face of demoralizing social and economic disparities, such as his declaration to over 200,000 listeners on August 28, 1963, while on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial during the March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom. "I have a dream today," he said. Some of us have even witnessed firsthand the Martin Luther King Jr. Memorial on the National Mall in Washington, D.C., his resolute and determined gaze carved in granite within a stone of hope, wrenched out of a mountain of despair. But it is the words of Dr. King that I believe resonate most synchronously with the mission of our law school here in Columbia, South Carolina. Dr. King was imprisoned nearly 30 times throughout his lifetime. And during one of those occasions on Good Friday in April of 1963, while sitting inside of the Birmingham City Jail, King wrote a letter to fellow clergymen about the law. He asked them a question that might very well frame our conversation here today, a question about the quest for a beloved community. King asked rhetorically, "How can you advocate breaking some laws and obeying others?" King would provide us with an answer 5 years later, in 1968, in a book entitled The Trumpet of Conscience. In that book, he declared, quote, "It really boils down to this, that all life is interrelated. We are all caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied into a single garment of destiny. Whatever affects one directly affects all indirectly. Today, by honoring the life and legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., our goal as the only public law school in the state of South Carolina is to affirm our long-standing commitment to preparing lawyer leaders who are fully equipped not only to defend just laws, but also to dissent, to be trumpets of conscience when the rule of law furthers injustice. As an educational institution, we aim to cultivate transformative opportunities for our students to learn about the legal history of civil rights, about racial justice, and about social justice advocacy in the United States and beyond. But perhaps more important, as a public institution, we strive to empower our community members to come together and confront the many challenges that will face our nation on the roads ahead. I now would like to invite to the podium Dr. Monique Lyle, the Deputy Director of the Center for Civil Rights History and Research, who will offer introductory remarks. She will then be followed by our law school dean, William Hubbard, who will introduce our keynote speaker.
Thank you, Professor Toussaint. My name is Monique Lyle. I'm the Deputy Director of the Center for Civil Rights History and Research here at the University of South Carolina, and we are honored to be co-sponsors of this important event tonight. Thank you all for joining us. The Center for Civil Rights History and Research launched in 2015 to chronicle, preserve, and share the contributions of South Carolina to the American Civil Rights Movement, and we aim to serve as a national model for interdisciplinary work in civil rights research, programming, and advocacy. I.S. Leevy Johnson and the important contributions of him and his family to our state's long struggle to advance civil and human rights have been central to the center's work and to our very existence. As stated by our executive director, Dr. Bobby Donaldson, quote, "Without Mr. Johnson's steadfast support and strong advocacy, the Center for Civil Rights History and Research would not be the organization that it is today. We're honored to work with him as we document, preserve, and promote the histories of individuals and organizations that advance justice for all in South Carolina and around the nation," end quote. The center is proud to have worked with Mr. Johnson to acquire his papers for the South Carolina political collections housed in the Hollings Special Collections Library, and the university's South Caroliniana Library is fortunate to be the repository of the papers of Mr. Johnson's grandfather, Mr. I.S. Leevy, who was a founding member of the Columbia NAACP, and like his grandson, a key figure in South Carolina politics and civil rights. Mr. Johnson's family and the important roles they've played in the history of this city, our state, and this nation through entrepreneurship, community building, and human rights advocacy figure prominently in the Center for Civil Rights Intersection on Main Street exhibit, currently featured at the Columbia Museum of Art free of charge. You all should visit it. Also, I want to encourage you all on your way out to view the items on display in our pop-up exhibit in the lobby area, where you will see information documenting the contributions of Mr. Johnson, as well as other African-American lawyers who have been central to advancing civil and human rights in South Carolina. I know that it is because of persons like Mr. Johnson, his grandfather, I.S. Leevy, and the many heroes of the civil rights movement in South Carolina, known and unknown, that I and many of you are able to be here today and contribute to the work of preserving and promoting their important legacies. Thank you for your work and commitment, Mr. Johnson. And I think I speak for most of us, if not all of us here, when I say that I am very much looking forward to learning from you this evening. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is William Hubbard, and I'd add my welcome to that of Professor Toussaint, and so glad to see you all here tonight for this important occasion. It's my privilege to introduce our keynote speaker, I.S. Leevy Johnson. I.S. Leevy Johnson is recognized and known as one of South Carolina's top civil and criminal trial lawyers, and he is the founder of Johnson, Toll, and Batiste Law Firm, an extraordinary law firm. He graduated from the University of South Carolina School of Law in 1968 as the first African American to complete all 3 years of his legal education at this law school since Reconstruction. He was honored by his legal peers in 1985 when he was the first African American elected president of the South Carolina Bar. Mr. Johnson has received numerous top honors. From the South Carolina Bar Foundation, he received the Durant Distinguished Public Service Award for illustrious public service. The University of South Carolina School of Law awarded him the Complete Lawyer Award for his dedication and support of legal education and his service to the bar. For his unselfish service to his peers of the Richland County Bar, he received the John W. Williams Distinguished Service Award. On April 21, 2000, he was awarded the prestigious Matthew J. Perry Medallion by the Columbia Lawyers Association for his contributions to improving the quality of legal services to citizens of South Carolina. He is a fellow of the American College of Trial Lawyers and was elected by the lawyers of South Carolina to serve as the state delegate to the American Bar Association and served in that capacity for 9 years. He has also served as a board member of the American Bar Endowment. In 2014, he received the Spirit of Excellence Award from the American Bar Association. On October 18, 1999, he received the state of South Carolina's highest award, the Order of the Palmetto. Benedict College, the University of South Carolina, Aiken University, and Morris College have all bestowed upon him the honorary Doctor of Laws degree. None of this would have happened if Mr. Johnson hadn't taken a chance on himself and his future. Mr. Johnson didn't start out with a plan to become a lawyer. His first aim was to become a mortician, to be part of his family's business, Levy's Funeral Home. He first studied mortuary science in Minnesota, then earned his B.S. from Benedict College before deciding to enroll at the USC School of Law. Upon graduation in 1968, our honoree today set out on his distinguished journey. He made history on November 3rd, 1970, 2 years after his law school graduation, when he, along with James Felder and Herbert Fielding, were elected to the South Carolina General Assembly, becoming the first African Americans since Reconstruction to be elected to the state legislature. Mr. Johnson served 10 years in the General Assembly and was a founding member of the Legislative Black Caucus. With an eye to the future of the legal profession, Mr. Johnson established the I.S. Leevy Johnson Scholarship here at the law school in 1997 to create more opportunities for young lawyers who have the ability but not the financial means to attend law school. When asked why he wanted to establish a scholarship, he simply replied, "Because law school is so expensive." But more than that, he considered it a worthy investment in not just those students, but to the greater good for the benefit of the community at large. Friends, I know you will agree with me that the history of the University of South Carolina School of Law has been enhanced immeasurably by its association with I.S. Leevy Johnson over the past 5 decades. But it goes beyond that. I.S. Leevy Johnson is a true leader and role model for the countless young lawyers who have followed in his footsteps. His contributions to the legal profession and this school have left an indelible mark on our state and our nation. His legal acumen is matched only by his quick wit. Anyone who has had the pleasure to know him or work with him has been enriched by the experience. As is appropriate for his standing as a trailblazer and inspiring leader, Mr. Johnson was selected as tonight's keynote speaker to honor the legacy of Dr. King. It was about 10 years ago I had the opportunity to visit the Martin Luther King Memorial and Monument in Washington. And if you've been there along that long granite wall, there are 12 quotes. And the one on the farthest right says, "True peace is not just the absence of tension, it is the presence of justice." The life and legacy of our keynote speaker has been about just that, about justice. And it is my honor to present Mr. Johnson to you now for his remarks.
Dean Hubbard, Professor Toussaint, Dr. Lyles, ladies and gentlemen, I'm humbled by that introduction. As I listen to my dear friend, Dean William Hubbard, so many thoughts crossed my mind. And a major thought was, William, our enduring friendship, which I truly treasure. As I look over the audience, I recognize a lot of faces. And I want you to know that I'm mindful of your attendance, and thank you very, very much. At the outset, I would like to recognize a special person, Jade Baptiste. Jade Baptiste is the daughter of my law partner, Luther Baptiste and Judy Baptiste, and she was very instrumental in helping with the research to prepare me for my remarks tonight. I want y'all to know how truly happy I am to be here this evening. Saying that reminds me of something that happened a few days ago with a florist. As most of you know, our family is in the funeral business. And the other day, a local businessman had some friends and he wanted to send them some flowers. One of his friends was opening up a business in a new location, and the other friend had death in the family. A few days after asking the florist to send these flowers, the florist got this call from the businessman, and he was really, really upset. It appears that the florist sent the flowers to the wrong location. On the flowers that he was supposed to send to the businessman, the flowers said, "You have my deepest sympathy." And on the flowers that he sent to the graveside service, that card had on it, "I hope you're enjoying your new location." Well, I want y'all to know I'm enjoying my location here, being with you here this evening. listen to me very carefully. It is fitting and appropriate for us to look back, but we must never go back. That's my message to you. Everything else I say is gravy. Allow me to begin my remarks by telling you a story. It was on the 29th day of September 1959 when I was a senior at a segregated high school, but a superior school, Leevy Johnson High School here in Columbia. That day became historical in my life. When I was 10 years old, my grandfather, I.S. Leevy, and my grandmother, Mary E. Leevy, they wanted one grandchild to come live with them, and I was selected. My grandfather started Leevy's Funeral Home in 1932, and I was born in 1942. He originally had a combination filling station funeral home on the corner of Taylor and Gregg Streets. He built a new building on the corner of Taylor and Gregg Street in 1952. In addition to constructing the new building for the funeral business, it also included a living quarters. One part of the living quarters was for me and my grandparents, and the other part was for my Uncle Kirk, Isaac Kirkland Leevy. So I had the good fortune of being raised by my grandparents and my parents. My grandfather, I.S. Leevy, was very active politically. He witnessed and experienced a lot of injustice. But he committed himself to fighting for people of color. When Dr. King organized the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, he structured his board so that there would be representation from each southern state. In the state of South Carolina, Dr. King selected my grandfather, I.S. Leevy, and the Reverend Matthew McCollum of Orangeburg to represent this state. The Reverend Matthew McCollum was a Methodist minister and a dynamic civil rights leader. My grandfather, along with others, arranged a visit for Dr. King and his team to come to Columbia, South Carolina on September 29th, 1959. When I arrived home from school that afternoon, I first met the Reverend Ralph David Abernathy. Shortly thereafter, I met Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr. At the age of 17, I had the opportunity to meet and personally talk with Dr. King. That night, Dr. King delivered a powerful speech at the Columbia Township Auditorium. I was in attendance. I also met Dr. King on another occasion. I did not mention it, but my grandfather was totally blind, and it fell my lot to drive for him and accompany him on many occasions. At a board meeting at the Southern Christian Leadership Conference held in Atlanta, Georgia at Spelman University, I attended the meeting with my grandfather and had the opportunity to observe the proceedings. I must admit, I did not appreciate the significance of that at that time of having met Dr. King twice, but I appreciate it now. Today I treasure the honor. Not many people in South Carolina can claim that they had the opportunity to meet Dr. King on 2 occasions. a historical fact that I want to call to your attention, and it's not well known. Dr. King was supposed to visit Zion Baptist Church here in Columbia on April 3rd, 1968. That appearance was canceled so Dr. King could remain in Memphis, Tennessee to support striking sanitation workers. The situation there was very volatile. Dr. King was supposed to be in Columbia, South Carolina on April 3rd, 1968, and he was assassinated the next day in Memphis, Tennessee on April 4th, 1968. In Dr. King's struggle for freedom, he always had lawyers fighting on his behalf. In 2019, right here in this auditorium, one of his lead lawyers, Fred Gray, spoke in this auditorium. Although Dr. King was not a lawyer, he possessed many of the attributes of a lawyer. He had an analytical mind. He was an advocate. He always sought a favorable verdict. With his analytical mind, he recognized the segregated system that existed in America was morally and legally an injustice. As an advocate, he became the persuasive voice to convince this nation to change its wicked ways, and he advocated nonviolence. And he sought a favorable verdict that would result in eliminating all injustice. The battles that Dr. King, his colleagues and lawyers wage, particularly over this nation, and especially in South Carolina, are very significant. What is often overlooked is the important and crucial roles that lawyers of color here in South Carolina played in fighting against injustices. Notice that I do not personally use the word minority lawyers. In my opinion, minority in America is a synonym for inferiority, and I don't believe anybody is inferior. That's why I use the expression lawyers of color. The lawyers in South Carolina were in the forefront of fighting racial injustice, social injustice, economic injustice, and fighting white supremacy. Examples of the cases that they waged were, one was Elmore versus Rice. Harold R. Bulwell and Thurgood Marshall fought to desegregate the white Democratic primary. In Briggs versus Elliott, Harold Bulwell and Thurgood Marshall fought to desegregate the Clarendon County schools, which was made a part of Brown versus Board of Education in 1954. In 1954, Matthew J. Perry and Lincoln C. Jenkins Jr. brought the case of Cyril May Fleming versus South Carolina Electric and Gas, which made segregation on any public transportation illegal. These lawyers contested white juries. They contested racial discrimination in jury selections. They contested voting rights suppression, voter registration, segregated school systems, disparity in teachers' pay, challenged state laws that prevented teachers from becoming members of the NAACP. And they challenged segregated waiting rooms in Greenville Airport. I could be here all night just listing all of the battles that these civil rights lawyers fought. Harold Boulware, Matthew Perry, Lincoln Jenkins Jr., Ernest Finney, William T. Smith Jr., Bernard Fielding, Albert Kennedy, W. Newton Pugh, Zach Townsend, Reuben Gray, Hemphill Pride, Fred Moore, and others. They made a difference. These civil rights lawyers were strong advocates who successfully combated injustices. Today, my friends, we need a new group of civil rights lawyers. We need some more civil rights fighters. In my opinion, there are forces in existence in our midst who want to turn the clock back. As we witness the chaos permeating our nation, serious concerns need to be devoted to the future of our nation. It is naive to ignore the forces that are operating. There are a lot of them, but I want to quickly mention three. The three threats to our nation that I want to share with you, you might agree or disagree, but I'm firmly convinced that they do exist. The first threat is Donald Trump. Too many people are underestimating Donald Trump and what he is doing to this country. I repeat, too many people are underestimating what Donald Trump is doing to this country. Donald Trump is a force to be reckoned with. He is one of the most persuasive persons that have ever been on the world stage. There is an abundance of evidence to prove he is a threat to justice. He got elected based on racial appeal. His motto, "Make America Great Again," was code language to his followers that sent them the message that we have this black man in the presidency for 8 years. Now we must take our country back. When he got elected, it opened the doors for overt racism. Racism has always existed in this country, but when Donald Trump got elected, white racists had a comfort level to be open. And his conduct motivated and resulted in what happened on January 6th. What are you telling me, Chris? Get closer to the mic. Why didn't you tell me earlier? This is my pastor. Am I doing okay, Chris? Okay. It's rough when you it's rough when you work for your children. At the law firm, I work for my son, George Johnson. At the funeral home, I work for my son, Christopher Leevy Johnson, and they have one thing in common. They don't pay Daddy very well. Their opinion is they pay me what I'm worth. But in a very serious vein, I really am convinced that Donald Trump is a threat to our society. The second threat is Clarence Thomas. Clarence Thomas is the most influential justice on the Supreme Court. If you study his history, he was once in the minority on the United States Supreme Court. Now he leads the majority. The majority that was created by Trump appointments is now led not by Chief Justice Roberts, but by Clarence Thomas. Now you can see them doing exactly what they historically criticized other courts of doing, and that is legislating. They are making up new laws. You only have to look at the Dobbs versus Jackson Women's Health Organization case where they overturned Roe versus Wade as proof of my point. Further proof is the Harvard University of North Carolina decision where the court in effect abolished affirmative action. Let's be honest now. We've always had affirmative action in America. It was called white supremacy. The third threat, in my opinion, are southern state legislatures. Reapportionment, gerrymandering by state legislatures has resulted in grave injustices. They have created districts to exclude people who would fight for racial justice. They have gerrymandered and drawn the lines so people who would be advocates of fair representation are excluded. They have drawn lines so we have a polarized government, not only on the state level, but on the congressional levels. It is said that we have a two-party system in South Carolina and in America. The Democratic Party and the Republican Party. I also say we have a two-party system. And that system is the haves and the have-nots. The haves is composed of those who have gotten rich and control American government. They are favored because of the color of their skin, because they don't have melanin in their skin, and often oppose others who are fighting to get a slice of the American pie. The have-nots are those who have been blocked at every turn from enjoying the rights and privileges of full citizenship. Injustice to us, the have-nots, is very pervasive and real. We experience it every day. Notice I use the pronoun us and we, and included myself. I know that what some of you might be thinking, how can IS say that? He has all of the appearances of being a have. Let me say to all of you in no uncertain terms, I am not suffering from an illusion of inclusion until all of my brothers and sisters are accorded all the rights and privileges guaranteed by the Constitution. I will always consider myself that I am in the class of the have-nots. Until everyone is given a fair opportunity to receive justice and not be treated unjustly because of the color of their skin, I will stay in the category of have-nots. In conclusion, now I'm Baptist, so y'all know that don't mean anything. In the Baptist church, the minister will say in conclusion and won't conclude. And will say, I'm finished, and will not finish. And when he says finally, it means absolutely nothing. But in conclusion, I invite you to take a journey with me. I want to illustrate to all of you how an injustice was transformed into a justice. In 1947, a young Negro student at the Colored Normal, Industrial, Agricultural, and Mechanical College of South Carolina, now known as South Carolina State University, named John H. Wrighton, decided he wanted to attend law school. He applied to enroll at the University of South Carolina Law School. His application was denied. At the time, the state of South Carolina condoned a system of injustice. The state's constitution provided a system of segregation of races in all of its schools. The Constitution stated, separate schools shall be provided for children of their white and colored races, and no child of either race shall be permitted to attend a school provided for children of the other race. Mr. Wrighton retained some black lawyers by the name of Harold Boulware, W.F. Robinson, Thurgood Marshall, and Robert Carter. Mr. Wrighton sued the University of South Carolina. As a result of that lawsuit, the late South Carolina Federal District Judge J. Wade Waring ruled the state of South Carolina had to do one of three things. It had to either admit Mr. Wrighton to the law school here at the University of South Carolina or establish a law school at the state college, at South Carolina State College. Or the third alternative was the state was prohibited from furnishing a law school for either whites or Negroes. The state decided to create a law school in Orangeburg at State College. That decision was fortuitous for me. The state of South Carolina didn't realize at the time, by creating that law school at State College, that law school produced some of the best civil rights lawyers that this world has ever known. One of the lawyers was Matthew J. Perry. History will accurately record that Matthew J. Perry, along with many of his colleagues, persistent effort to fight injustice in South Carolina resulted in many barriers of injustice being eradicated and destroyed. His efforts, for example, was instrumental in Harvey Gantt being admitted to Clemson University. He represented Henri Monteith. She was the lead plaintiff in the case of Henri Monteith versus the University of South Carolina, which resulted in the University of South Carolina being desegregated. As I said, Harold Boulware instituted this lawsuit on behalf of John H. Wrighton. When I first opened my law practice, as a sole practitioner. Harold Boulware's office was at 1127 Washington Street. My two-room law office was located at 1127 and a half Washington Street. In the same block of Washington Street, at 1107 and a half Washington Street, was the law office of Jenkins, Perry, and Pride. When I started practicing law, I had the good fortune of being tutored by these legends. The first divorce case I had, Lincoln C. Jenkins Jr. drafted the pleadings. The first time I went to municipal court, Henry Pride told me how to handle the case. And the first time I had a major case in criminal case in General Sessions Court, I called Judge Matthew Perry, and he left his office to come sit with me to help me try that case. So, on my journey to become a lawyer, it started when Harold Boulware and his co-counsel sued the University of South Carolina on behalf of John H. Wrighton to become a law student. That was in 1947. It continued when Matthew J. Perry sued the University of South Carolina to arrange for Henri Monteith, Robert Anderson, and Jim Solomon to become students here at the University of South Carolina in 1963. I enrolled as a law student in 1965 and graduated after I graduated from Benedict College. Tonight, you are listening to the first graduate of the University of South Carolina, as Dean Hubbard said, who completed all 3 years and earned a law degree. And if you visit the Coleman Carish reading room, based on the leadership of my friend Dean Hubbard, you will see a portrait of me hanging on the wall. The injustice of 1947 led to the justice of me being admitted in 1965. And if you go look at that portrait, you will see an image of me. But what I really want you to realize is that it is an image of me, but it's a symbol of John H. Wrighton, Matthew Perry, Lincoln Jenkins, Ernest Finney, all the lawyers who dedicated their lives to fighting injustice. They made it possible for that portrait to be hung in this law school. Finally, I find that many speakers do a great job in describing problems, but they fail to share solutions. There is no perfect solution to fighting injustice. Fighting injustices requires for all people, just like all of you, to pattern yourselves like the armed forces. Some need to be in the Army, some need to be in the Air Force, some need to be in the Navy, some need to be in the Marines, because it is a major battle. To correct these injustices, the fight that lawyers advance is crucial. We must have lawyers combating all of the injustice that exists in America today. And for each of you, you can be an active member of the effort. And permit me to suggest a strategy that all of us can employ. It is found in the words of a song that was recorded by a gospel group by the name of Jackson Southern Airs. Here are some of the words of that song. And these are the words that guide my life every day. The title of that song is "Don't Look Down on a Man Unless You're Picking Him Up." Some people laugh at other people because they don't have food to eat. Some people find it funny that others don't have no shoes on their feet. Some people laugh at other people because they live in houses so small. Some people find it funny because some people don't have any home at all. But things may be good for you today, but tomorrow, things can be so rough. You should go to the mirror and take a good look at yourself, and you will find that you are no better than anyone else. And that's why I can say to all of you in no uncertain terms, don't ever look down on a man unless you're picking him up. Thank you very much. Please don't stop.
I'd like to ask IS to come back to the stage. So we're just going to entertain for a brief moment one or two questions from the audience. We thought it robbery if we not allow an opportunity for you to ask. I know many of you have burning questions, but at least allow you to ask one or two questions, and then we'll transition toward the final part of our program. So there are some microphones here in the center if anyone would like to ask a question of our distinguished guest.
I would like to ask the question, nowadays, why is it so hard to retain an attorney now in this noble profession?
What is the question? That is a good question. Unfortunately, in today's climate, too many lawyers have dedicated themselves to making money instead of improving the quality of life for all mankind. And one of the studies that's being conducted now is that the cost of getting into the courthouse is so expensive that it's in effect blocked the doors for a lot of people. And but I am very hopeful and optimistic that as people witness the problems that this country is facing, that they will recognize that they have an obligation as lawyers to improve the quality of life for all mankind. And I see some young people who have that commitment and that dedication. Inherent in the system is always going to be some weaknesses, but hopefully things will improve. And the other thing is the discrimination. Just like when I was growing up, they had white and colored signs, and you went to Woolworths and Crest, and you couldn't use certain bathrooms, and it was so open then, but a lot of it's so subtle and so covert now. It's hard to attack it.
Thank you so much. Do we have any more questions that we'd like to ask? We can maybe take one more. One or two more.
Mr. Johnson, I agree wholeheartedly that Donald Trump presents an existential threat to democracy in this country as we know it. However, I'm troubled because so many of the polls show him to be doing well and that he would do well against the incumbent president. Give me some reason for optimism that this country will wake up and realize the threat that he presents and that he will not be reelected.
Pat, I hope my hearing aid heard you. The optimism that I have is that it seems that the response often measures the problem. What I mean by that is when there's a serious problem, we come forward with serious solutions. And just like we are assembled here this evening, and in the old days, you wouldn't have this opportunity to assemble together. But my major concern is that, as I made that reference to suffering from an illusion of inclusion, that the enthusiasm, the excitement, the determination to combat all of this injustice, I don't witness. And maybe it's more sophisticated. Maybe you have to do it on a more sophisticated level, and it's not as visual. Because I think what happened in the civil rights movement, people were aware of the discrimination and the segregation, but until it was shown on TV and the Bull Connors incidents, those things motivated people because they saw how horrific it was to address those serious problems. And I think today that I don't believe we're going to ever have another Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. I don't believe that we'll ever have these single leaders. But I think it's going to have to be the collective effort of communities to, number one, to acknowledge that we have problems. The disturbing thing right now, as I said, Donald Trump is a threat, but really the major threat is how many people following him, how many people have adopted those type of attitudes and adopted those type of feelings. Here we are in this great law school today. On the same day, a candidate for the President of the United States is in a New York courthouse acting like a clown and using the courthouse as a stomping ground for political speech. And yet, some people approve of it. Oh, I'm so proud that he's doing it.
Well, with that, please join me one more time in thanking our distinguished keynote speaker, Leevy Johnson. And before you go back to your seat, we would love to present you with this plaque this evening. And I'll just...
Which bank can I deposit this in?
So I'll just read this. It says, in recognition of your service and leadership as our keynote speaker, I.S. Leevy Johnson, Esquire, January 11th, 2024.